summarize how this regime got to power and what they've been doing really since 1979.
I can give you one simple answer and one word: lies. Trump trying to make a deal or pretend to make a deal with this regime has deterred the Iranian people and has confused the situation. So if he's sitting around waiting for, oh, well, maybe the Iranian people will pour out into the street again, you're confusing the situation, and all the signals that you're sending is completely outrageous.
Welcome back to the studio here at Jewish News Syndicate. This week I was in Washington, D.C. At a conference put on by the Middle East Forum, and it was a great privilege and an honor to reunite with a friend who I had not seen for a long time, Banafsheh Zand, who is a journalist, an analyst, and an author who was born in Iran, whose family went through the revolution, who's more plugged in, I think, to the plight of the Iranian people, what's going on in the various dissident movements than almost anyone. And it's a real privilege to have you here with me today to discuss what's going on in Iran, because obviously Iran is at the top of the headlines all over the world.
Thank you, Alex. It was lovely to see you, and I'm delighted that we reconnected. And yeah, I'm always trying to bring awareness to what's going on inside Iran and explain to people who the Khameneist regime authorities are, what their methods and their modus operandi is. And I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's been an uphill battle, I can tell you that much.
Okay, so this is going to be hard to do, but I'm going to ask you on one foot and very quickly to summarize how this regime got to power and what they've been doing really since 1979. I want the 3-sentence answer, and then we'll go on from there.
I can give you one simple answer and one word: lies. They told lies to the people of Iran, who were the very small group of people who supported them. They told lies to Westerners who were only too happy to see the Shah go, despite the fact that the Shah was an excellent manager of a burgeoning country. And they basically destroyed the future of not only a wonderful nation, but also the fact that the region was turned into a wild mess that we now see.
So the Shah was trying to modernize Iran for all the problems that may have existed. Yes, we have multiple guests here on the program today. And yet from this track toward modernization, we got an Islamic Republic, which has really a repressive view of the world, at least from the Western perspective. And they have been ruling by force. They're basically dictators in Iran and have seemingly taken the Iranian cause back many, many decades. Tell me a little bit about what the goals of this regime are. What do they see as being the best possible future for themselves and for Iran?
Well, look, they've never hidden the fact that they started out by saying that they wanted to create the Islamic pole. They want to take up the mantle of Islam and basically push out the Sunnis. I mean, though they have collaborated and cooperated with Sunni terror groups and so on, they have always had the intention of being the sole Islamic pole and the sole managers of the world of Islam, if you will. And then they've also admitted to the fact that that's just the launch point, that's the area where they're going to start, and they're going to then export it to the rest of the world. And they have done it. A lot of the terror that we see today, I would say probably 98% of it is funded by them. It has been expanded around the world through them and through their methods of basically, taking the issue of the Palestinian issue, trying to inflame feelings against Jews, against Christians, trying to fan the flames of any kind of hatred and dimitude, if you will. And basically they started out with Iran. And I'm sorry to say that most Western countries and leaders let them get away with it.
Well,
You,
where's Iran getting the money to do this? I mean, it's not like a situation like Qatar where there's endless funds and they're able to hedge their bets both in business and fund terror organizations or whatever they decide to do. I mean, we're seeing that there's rolling blackouts in Iran. The economy is doing very poorly. The national currency is at all-time lows. So meanwhile, they seem to be funding terror organizations that are destabilizing the entire Middle East, but something economically doesn't seem to add up.
well, it's always been oil and the use of and the sale of Iran's natural resources. I mean, Iran's a very, very natural resource rich country. Um, we are the fourth oil richest country in the world, and they have never shied away from making deals with whoever was willing to overstep the bounds of ethical and humanitarian behavior. And specifically, I'm sorry to say that, well, I mean, Russia and China, one can sort of expect, but the Europeans have been one of their best allies and partners in perpetuating their dirty business around the world, and they've gotten away with it.
Well, this Islamic Republic, they talk about death to Israel, which is of very very disappointing, damaging, dangerous for Israel. But they also talk about death to America. I guess Europe is not necessarily part of that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing because and this is what's really interesting is that a lot of people who just want to look at things in this sort of a literal way and don't want to think in more critical ways about how, what these people mean and how they state things. So it's not just about Israel and America, it's about everything in between and all of the liberal democracies around the world. Anything that is considered, a modernist, progressive, let's say, way of life where the a nation is protected, where human rights are respected, where various civil rights are respected. That's not how they rule. They have always said, and this is what's really interesting, is that it's not like they're only speaking in Farsi. They speak in English as well, and or we translate a lot of what they say, and a big part of it is the fact that the nation is at the service of the the authorities. In other words, it's people living in the country have absolutely no rights, and it is the authorities who will decide for them.
We know here in Israel that many people around the world that don't support Israel or against Israel, they necessarily couldn't identify Israel on a map. They don't even know where it is. They don't know how big it is. And I think that there's something similar applies vis-a-vis Iran. I mean, people just think about the Middle East as being a continent of Arabs, and they think of Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Iran. But Iran and its history is much different. This is a completely different people with a very proud culture, that has been a modernizing force over centuries. And even, there's a strong relationship historically between Israel and Iran. And the Iranian people, again, were moving on this path of modernization until the revolution in 1979. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about what the support for the Islamic Republic looks like inside Iran. It can't be that not one person inside Iran supports this Islamic Republic. and then tell me about, who doesn't, and what those movements look like in terms of an organizational perspective.
Well, let me just start out by saying that I I can very safely say that 90% of Iranians loathe this regime. I mean, loathe it, and especially Gen Z. This generation is not having any of it. And as the old 1970s song goes, you can't fool the children of the revolution. These kids have grown up under this mess, and they've had it, and they are looking to get rid of it. The 10% that support the regime are different factions. And I've been talking about this till I'm blue in the face since 2006, that if you want to get this regime, get an idea of this regime, you have to look at the infighting and these factions within that 10%, because it's not just one solid block. There's the hardliners, the ultra hardliners, the flaky reformists, the reformists who want to, like Javad Zarif, who want to kiss John Kerry and and shake hands with Barack Obama. But literally, the thing is that every one of them is at each other. They're all at each other's throats. And a lot of it has now turned into more of a mafia kind of a situation. It's by no means, yes, there's ideological issues and, there's Shia stuff in it. But the point is that the actions and the existence between these various groups has now become very mafiaistic.
How does 10% of the country hold 90% of the country hostage?
Guns.
Pretty simple.
And violence. I mean, my father was in prison for 15 years, in and out of prison 4 times, arrested 4 times. And finally in 2001, which was the final time, the big time that they arrested him, they disappeared him for 4 months. We didn't know where he was, what prison he was in. And finally, we figured out that they really have it out for him and they want him gone. They did whatever they could to try to, keep him in prison. And of course, there was a lot of international outrage and, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, UN, this, that, and the other. They finally let him out. But then in 2011, they went to the house where he was under house arrest, and they threw him out of the 6th floor balcony. And this is how they deal with people. When it comes to dissent, they have their ways to deal with dissent, and they will lie. I mean, in the case of my father, they've said forever he committed suicide. No, he didn't. The whole country knows that he didn't commit suicide. Everybody knows that he didn't commit suicide, because that's not how it's done. But the bottom line is that their violence is their method of keeping everybody down and keeping everybody in their own place.
Well, Iran's certainly been, and this Islamic Republic has been at the forefront of the attention of numerous U.S. administrations, particularly as Iran has continued to develop an illicit nuclear weapons program. And maybe you can take me back through some of the history of these administrations. We saw that really through primarily the Obama administration, where they really shifted away from that policy, Republican, Democrat, over many, many years. Tell me a little bit about that era and what happened.
Well, for me, I was blacklisted from 2003 onward. I mean, when I started to expose Joe Biden doing fundraisers for his Senate reelection bid in, Los Angeles, with very objectionable individuals who were, big supporters of the mullahs, but who lived in Los Angeles or in California or New York City, who were open lobbyists of the regime. We're talking about normalizing relations with the regime. And at that point, it was not only about the political prisoners anymore. We were hearing about the nukes. We knew that they were doing the nukes. They were recruiting people all around the Middle East and all over, like the Gaza, Palestinian territory, this, that. They were trying desperately to create an invisible army that they can deploy around the world. And the nukes were, of course, then they were just beginning to talk about it. So when I started to expose Biden and a lot of the Democrats, because John Kerry was in it, and at that point Obama was just becoming the senator, he wasn't quite yet in it the way he ended up being. But the fact is that the Democrats were very, very happy and willing to go along with everything that the regime was doing. The Asia Society in New York was bringing authorities of the Khamenei's regime to talk to, fancy New Yorkers about, all of the wonderful things that the mullahs were looking to do for Iran, and everybody was just happy to drink the Kool-Aid. And no matter what we said, the more somebody like me, especially me, screamed, the more they shut me up, and the funding was off, the jobs were off. Nothing. I was completely blacklisted, and I wasn't the only one. There's several other Iranians who went through the same thing, only because of the fact that we were pointing out that these people were going along with an agenda that was unacceptable. And yet,
well, what did they think that they were going along with? What was the motivations of the Obama administration and those that Trita Parsi and Nayak and others, had essentially compromised on this issue? What was the thinking there?
I can only speculate. I mean, to me, I don't even understand this. I mean, somebody like Barack Obama, who clearly loves his fancy Western life, why would this person actively promote and support the elevation of a regime that openly speaks about destroying liberal democracies and Western society and so on? There was the cognitive dissonance has always been a big question for me. I've never understood it.
And we had the Green Revolution, I believe it was 2009, where you had Iranians coming out into the streets, appearing to be ready to take back their country if only they could get some support. And yet the Obama administration didn't put his support behind those in the streets. They were being gunned down at people in the streets, and they put their support behind the administration.
Yeah.
How far back did that set the cause for the Iranian people?
Huge. Because the whole thing started out as, as people being angry about the fact that they voted for one person and the vote went to somebody, whoever the regime wanted. That in and of itself should have spoken volumes to somebody like Obama. But of course, he chose to ignore it by claiming that he didn't want to get involved in the internal affairs of another country. Meanwhile, we can talk about Egypt and Libya all we want, but doesn't seem to make any difference. The bottom line is that look, the thing that I found particularly disgusting in this situation, in that first in 2009, I must say that the beauty of that movement. Now, outside the fact that it turned into the fact that people started to show their disdain for the regime in general. I mean, in other words, yes, we got out there because we voted for somebody, but then that vote went to this other person. That right there is a depiction of exactly who this
was. That Ahmadinejad? Was that
that was Ahmadinejad? Yeah, and the two people who had gotten the votes were Karoubi, Mahdi Karoubi, and Mousavi. Now, the thing is that beyond that, the disdain for the regime came out. People began to pour out into the streets by saying, look, just look at how they treat this quote vote. There is no vote. It's a joke in the end of the day. But the beauty of that movement was that up until then, if you had disparate protests. So one day you had the student protest, the other day you'd have another day you'd have the workers protest, another day you'd have I don't know, nurses protest. Finally, all of these protesters and all of these factions came together and it became one big giant movement. So that was the success of 2009. That was what was really wonderful about it.
You're seeing some similar protests taking place today.
Oh yeah, ever since then, that's been the form the protests have taken. So now everybody's come together and everybody supports everybody else. So when right now, for example, you have the truckers who started a strike, and everybody else is joining in. The teachers are joining in. The bread, the bakers are joining in. Various factions of society are joining the strike. In this case, it's a strike, but it's really also more of a protest because people don't want to go out there and get shot at. They don't want to go out there and have lose their eye or be, or whatever it is that this regime does with their goons who have the guns in the street and go after the protesters.
The Iranians have been very historically good at reading the tea leaves, right? They understand which way the winds are shifting, when could be their moment. Are the Iranian people now perceiving that the regime is vulnerable and weak?
Oh, yes, of course. But, at the same time, there are two issues. Beyond the fact that they see it as weak and teetering, they still don't want to, again, get shot at. They still don't want to have their kids killed. They don't want to get dragged into prison and tortured and detained illegally. And the regime does that. That's just how they operate. They did it in 2017, 2019, 2022. It's their modus operandi. They punish people who steadfast and true stand against them. Since in the last 14 months alone, they've executed 10 young men who were politically against them, and they've claimed that they were spying for Israel. No such thing. It does
seem perhaps that there are some people spying for Israel inside Iran. It appears as though Israel does have assets.
Israel has assets, but it's not assets that mullahs will ever find. I somehow, call me crazy, I don't imagine that the young man who was an IT student and who was sitting in prison was the guy who put anything in Ismail Hania's room, The thing is that I think that they know, the regime knows that they are in deep trouble, and they are doing whatever they can to swim. The good thing about this time is that they don't have their Hamas goons, they don't have their Hezbollah goons, their Houthi goons are having to fight their own mess. And all of their Basij and IRGC goons are, well, most of them anyhow, are in Russia fighting for Putin. So the fact is that if people pour out into the street right now, the likelihood of them being harmed as severely as they were before may be less.
Okay, so let's take a look at the nuclear program and the negotiations. On the one hand, the nuclear program is the way in which this Islamic Republic can assert its dominance worldwide and have a nuclear umbrella where they can affect and basically deter any actions against them across the region. And obviously the West, and particularly the Trump administrations, both of them, and now again, understand that a nuclear Iran is a threat not only to Israel, but to America, the entire region, and quite frankly, the entire world. But the negotiations have been conducted on the basis of the nuclear program. And what we're saying, I believe, is that, when the chicken and egg question again here with Iran is the regime did not come from a nuclear program. The nuclear program is being made by a regime, and as dangerous as the weapons are, like you said, people around the region don't go to sleep at night worrying that Israel is going to nuke them in the morning. The problem here is the people that have their fingers on the button. And while Trump is seemingly engaged with the Islamic Republic over the nuclear program, it would seem as though any negotiations basically legitimizes the regime one way or another. They're saying you can have a regime, you just can't have nuclear weapons. What's the problem? Is the problem the weapons, or is the problem with the people with their fingers on the button?
It's the problem with the people whose fingers are in the button. And the bottom line is that look, the regime will never concede to what Trump and now even Grossi or even the European Union is asking for. Because if they do, their entire existence would be null and void. They live and breathe for their ability to do what they've been working on, which is annihilation, taking over the world, waiting for their Mahdi to show up, their 12th Imam to, their version of the Messiah to show up. They are between, as they would say, the devil and the deep blue sea. They are put in a position where they can't, they would never in a million years accept what Trump is demanding of them. And the fact is that in the end of the day, all of the verbal acrobatics that they're doing, like today they were like, oh well, we'll make a deal if they didn't do this and they didn't do that, and they're, it's just they can't get away with it, and they know it.
Well, the Islamic Republic, they have a very long history of being exceptional negotiators. They also have a very long view of history. And we in the West, and especially if you look at the Trump administration, the president understands he's going to be the president maximum here for 3.5 more years. So he doesn't have a lot of time. The Iranians are playing for time over here. They just want to wait Trump out. If they can't advance their mission of world domination this year, they can do it next year or the year after that. So what is it about the American desire for fast results versus the Iranian patience and negotiating culture that creates a disconnect that ultimately might favor the regime as opposed to favor the West?
Look, I mean, if it was anybody else, I would have said that they probably know that they would succeed. But in the case of Trump, I think that they know that, again, they are in between the devil and the deep blue sea. I think that Trump's negotiation is ridiculous, because it has basically turned the Iranian people. It has confused the Iranian people. In other words, if he had said, we're going to put sanctions on you, on your various members of the IRGC, on your various organizations, on this, that, and the other, and we are going to stop you from selling your oil. We're going to demand that you stop the nuclear development, and so on and so forth. And we know that you have weapons. I mean, what country that has oil as much as Iran does and has all the sun in the world that Iran does need nuclear energy? It's a lie, and everybody knows it. And as they say in Italian, they're hiding behind their fingers when they say that they want it for civilian use. That's just complete nonsense. The fact is that I think Trump is trying to do this in order to satisfy the screaming Democrats and the flibberty-gibbet European Union.
Also, his own isolationist right-wing base that doesn't want to see the United States get involved militarily anywhere outside its borders.
That too. The likes of Tucker Carlson, who I think of as a dangerous individual and somebody who has absolutely no business talking foreign policy. Those people are basically in denial of the fact that this is a regime that is fanning the flames of this mess that we have in the country today, of innocent people being shot in Washington, innocent people in Boulder, Colorado being set on fire, innocent people all over the country. I mean, this is the thing that I don't understand. How many 9/11s have to happen in order for these people to understand it? The isolationists need to realize that those decades ended in World War I. There is no such thing as being able to keep the world and the United States or anywhere isolated anymore. It's a non-starter. But that said, the horrible thing is that Trump trying to make a deal or pretend to make a deal with this regime has deterred the Iranian people and has confused the situation. So if he's sitting around waiting for, oh, well, maybe the Iranian people will pour out into the street again. Well, you're not exactly giving them any
The right signal.
Yeah. You're confusing the situation, and all the signals that you're sending is completely outrageous and flaky. They don't know that, it's like George H.W. Bush against the Iraqis. Pour out into the streets, get rid of Saddam, and then we'll abandon you. So, this is another one of those situations where Iranians are like, well, we'd like to, but, we're not going to, lose more children, lose more innocent Iranians to.
Well, I have two questions here. Let's start with the question of the nuclear program. Let's say that there is a chance right now that at some point in the near future, maybe even in the next 3 months, there could be a joint Israeli-American strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. Would that be the type of a signal that would be necessary to demonstrate to the Iranian people that the strength of the regime has been completely degraded? Would that be enough to get the Iranians to go out in the street and to take over the regime change element that might be so necessary for the future of the Iranian people, as well as for the rest of the region and the rest of the world?
I want to say yes, but there has to be an understanding that people are horrified at the idea of civilian casualty. And the thing is that the media doesn't help. The media lies, as we saw just 2 days ago when they continued to claim that they were shooting on the Gazans who were out to receive aid packages and so on. But the other thing is, too, I don't know how you would strike the nuclear facilities in any way that would make any difference. I mean, they're 330 feet under the ground. And my other fear is radioactivity. I mean, right now, people in the city of Isfahan are already extremely, there's huge majority of people who are sick from radioactivity and have all kinds of various diseases and cancers. And so I don't know if that's, I'm not so sure that a strike on the nuclear facilities is all that wise.
Is there another path?
My path would be to do what they did. I mean, the pager stuff was fantastic. Those are the ways to go because it's targeted. It is it's not going to have any civilian casualty, and um I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, it's a bizarre situation because you've got Iranians inside Iran writing on graffiti on the wall saying, "Bibi, go ahead and hit them." But on the other hand, too, there is there is this thing where you think to yourself, do you really does anybody really want to start a war, a war in a country whose civilians and whose nation loathe the authorities? So I don't know. It's a
Let's
catch 22.
let's say somehow or another, and we don't necessarily know how, but this regime were to be overthrown, whether domestic overthrow or whether there were some foreign action that would promote the overthrow of the regime. Can you talk a little bit about the difference of the Iranian people and their capabilities versus what we saw in Iraq? Because I think that there's a lot of Americans that are worried about, looking at Afghanistan and looking at Iraq. You have the issue of nation building. Like, okay, we did the job, you took out Saddam Hussein, but now you're stuck in a place because you have to rebuild and there's no capabilities. I feel like in Iran, there's a lot more know-how about the institutions and people that are ready and willing to take responsibility for rebuilding the country.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, look, the culture of protest didn't exist in Iraq or in Afghanistan the way we have it in Iran. I mean, this has been ongoing, even if Iranians in 1978, 79 didn't know exactly what they were doing because they hadn't protested in the sense that they protested.
Well, they
in
didn't
like
know what
the
they were
19
doing because they got the wrong result.
They got the wrong result, and the thing is that it wasn't a national movement. It was an ideological movement that was portrayed as a national movement. It was a small group of people. It was a lot of the people that you would see in the streets. I mean, the big joke among Iranians, and this isn't actually a joke in that sense, but it's true that a lot of people were paid to come out into the streets. They would buy them lunch and they would give them, the equivalent of what would have been like a $25, and then people would show up onto the streets. And that really is the reality. But because I was there, I mean, I saw it with my own two eyes. I was 18 years old. I watched the whole thing happen from A to Z. Um, but the thing that really is true of the Iranian people is that in terms of this regime, the entire 40, let's say 46 plus years, Iranians have absolutely protested at least once a week. And it's not been just some flaky protest. It has been the real thing. So the culture of protests exists already within the Iranian community and our society. The other thing is that the crown prince, Reza Pahlavi, and a large group of Iranians who, I mean, we've been at this for 46 years and many discussions, many groups, many ideas, and everybody has finally, through trial and error, come together and figured out what needs to be put in place in order to guarantee stability in the first day free Iran. And so those organizations are in place. Those pundits and experts and analysts and all of the people, from business people to the various people who know how to manage various structures of a country, they're all in place. They've all been brought together. They've all been coalesced and in a sense ready to hit the ground running. So as far as an Iraq or an Afghanistan goes, that's not where Iran is. Iran's already, you know, we're we're ready and poised to hopefully take up the mantle and get everything stabilized as soon as possible.
And where does the age and health condition of the Ayatollah Khamenei fit in to the whole equation here?
Well, I'll be honest with you. He's 87 years old, but the fact is that his health situation is confusing. He's been in the hospital. We know that he's had some ailments. They said that he had prostate cancer, colon cancer, this, that, and the other. Nobody knows. It's not like it really gets out there. The fact of the matter, however, is that he's been looking around for a supreme guide, and he has chosen his second of 4 sons, who is an incredibly dangerous individual. His name is Mojtaba, and he's thick with the most vicious parts of the IRGC. He was the person behind the advent of Ahmadinejad. He is a Holocaust denier. He is an extraordinary thief. His bank accounts around the globe that we've heard of are unbelievable. And he's just as dangerous as his father, if not more.
Well, there's definitely a lot to discuss over here. I think we could unravel this for almost as much time as it took to put this whole situation together. It's a long time, and but I want to encourage people to learn more by going to the Substack, IranSoFarAway.substack.com. Banafsheh, you are a treasure, a wealth of information on what is taking place inside Iran and how to understand it, both from the Iranian perspective as well as from the Western perspective. You've been here for so many years and working as a journalist, an analyst, and an author. Banafsheh, once again, it's IranSoFarAway.substack.com. Thank you so much for being with us here at Jewish News Syndicate.
My pleasure. Thank you. What a pleasure. Thank you.